Hi, my name is Alyssa Curry, and I am a licensed professional counselor. Today, I'm going to walk you through expectations versus boundaries, understanding the difference, and also being able to recognize what you need. A reoccurring topic that often surfaces among sessions is expectations. Whether it's regarding a friend, a family member, or even a significant other. But some clients don't quite realize that what they are reacting to is an unmet expectation. This can often lead to disappointment, frustration, anger, low self-esteem, and most often, conflicts with others. But first, I challenge you to contemplate how you would define an expectation. Is it maybe an idea that you have in your head about how something should turn out? Or maybe it's a preconceived outcome that you're anticipating? Whatever it is worth defining and being able to understand how you see an expectation as well. This is an important topic to understand because expectations can set you up for failure. But to be clear, changing your expectations does not mean that you are lowering the bar or your standards. So let's take that out. On the other hand, boundaries can set you up for success. And my aim is to teach you how to be more effective and have better results for what you're wanting. So, I noticed that some individuals use expectations and boundaries pretty interchangeably without recognizing the context that they're being used in. So let's clear this up. Expectations and boundaries have two distinct meanings, but one can lead to the other, and that's where things get a little more complicated. So let's get into it. What is an expectation? An expectation is defined as the feeling or belief that something will or should happen. Expectations, in a sense, are stories, thoughts, or beliefs we create that result in a particular outcome. But if that specific outcome does not meet our standard, then we're unsatisfied. For example, have you ever watched a movie that a friend recommended and said it's so good, it'll hold your attention? And so then you have this high expectation that a movie will be amazing. But when you watch the movie, you find it pretty underwhelming and disappointing. Maybe it's not as much action as you thought, or maybe the plot was not as believable to you. But if you went into that movie without this prior knowledge or expectation, you may have been able to enjoy it for exactly what it is, rather than the outcome you were expecting. Another important aspect to address is that expectations typically are not shared with others. It's what we have in our head, but not what we've shared. I find that partners often possess these expectations and assume their partner should already know these things if they are in fact are a good partner. Yet this information is often shared after the conflict has occurred. For example, you may expect your significant other to recognize when you're sad, hurt, or in a bad mood as soon as you come through the door. But when this doesn't occur, it kind of leads to an unhealthy cycle. And that's when I often hear, they should know this by now. Expectations can lead down a rabbit hole. They make you more aware of others' actions or behaviors because you know what you're looking for, which then leads to unfair judgments, which is followed by frustration, resentment, mistrust, disappointment, and more when the standards are not properly met. That's because expectations are treated as if they are facts. Now, to be clear, expectations are necessary for certain settings, but this is when they are detailed or clarified. For example, when you apply for a job, you typically see a set of skills that they expect you to already possess. Maybe that's the ability to use Microsoft Word, be multilingual, maybe able to problem solve or be flexible, have some sort of previous training or certification, right? You see these lists. And when you accept the position, you are accepting the expectations set by that company. And just a reminder, what makes a situation different is that the expectations are typically defined and clarified prior. So let's talk about some of the settings that have expectations, because it's important to note that not all expectations are negative. Some expectations are necessary in certain environments in order to be effective. Other settings, in addition to the workplace, in which expectations may be present, are a few of the following. Academic settings is one. Expectations may include attending class on time. Maybe you have to maintain a B- or better to remain in a program or to participate in extracurricular activities. Maybe participation in class is an expectation, and respecting other classmates and professors. Now switching to restaurants. Specific restaurants have expectations regarding dress code. They also have expectations regarding manners, maybe noise level, and you may even be expecting satisfactory service and food prepared properly, right? Because that's what you're paying for. Therapy even has expectations. Even therapists expect a client to arrive on time, respect time by canceling or rescheduling prior to a certain time frame, to complete between session tasks or homework when discussed. So let's shift into the conversation about boundaries, because that's important to define as well. A boundary is defined as the limit of what someone considers to be acceptable behavior, or a real or imagined line that marks the edge or limit of something. Boundaries create and function as necessary and healthy structure. As the definition details, they create limits, your limits, for what you would deem acceptable. Boundaries invite healthy reflection of what is needed, and it encourages communication, discussion with others in order to establish, and mutual respect to uphold. While expectations are specific outcomes that are anticipated, boundaries are less restricting and allow the space for various outcomes, which leads to less disappointment. This is because boundaries take into account different factors, such as perspectives, situations, and other challenges. While expectations are often external because they focus on the behavior or actions of others, which cannot be controlled, boundaries are internal and focus on your needs instead, which are within your control. When you focus on your boundaries or limits, you're able to determine who or what fits within your space. It is really important to understand your values, needs, and your own rules in order to protect yourself. So now we'll talk about settings with boundaries. Boundaries look quite different compared to expectations in the same settings. So to give you a comparison, the following are a few examples of what boundaries may look like. So let's look at an academic setting. Boundaries in an academic setting may involve your self-care to prevent burnout, getting enough sleep to be more productive, maybe shutting off your phone for some alone time, and even limits within your own social connections. Next, let's take a look at a work or career environment. This may include having a healthy work-life balance, stepping away from your workday after it's ended, and can be as specific as personal details you may or may not share with coworkers or your boss. Now, let's compare therapy. Boundaries may include personal space within the session, certain self-disclosure, avoiding interactions outside of counseling to prevent conflict of interest, and more. So we've explored and defined expectations and boundaries, and we've also looked at the setting, which we can find both. But now it's time to actually bridge the gap. Our expectations help us think about what our boundaries are, and our boundaries inform our expectations. And when boundaries are set, there's an expectation that they'll be respected. But be careful, because what you consider important may not be valuable to others, and their actions may reflect that. For example, you may take vacation time from work and still get calls from coworkers for help or insight regarding a project. In this case, your vacation may not be as important to them, but upholding your boundaries protects you and continues to reflect your limits. So respect your boundaries, even if others may not. Now, it may be difficult to eradicate expectations overall. As I previously mentioned, there are settings in which expectations are needed. But take into account the various aspects that can lead to conflict, such as unrealistic or undisclosed expectations. Rather than maintaining unrealistic expectations, reframe and rebuild those expectations into boundaries, and that's the next step. Consider some of the expectations or issues you've had in the past because they can inform you of where to begin setting boundaries. Start small, be direct, define those boundaries, and practice exercising and expanding your boundaries. Be patient because it does take practice to put these into effect. Don't forget to communicate your boundaries to others. Otherwise, they may not know that they're doing something that you don't like. For example, you may remind your client of your office hours or inform your coworker that you're unavailable after a specific time, and those are boundaries. Overall, boundaries and expectations are developed from the same roots. They're both an attempt to have our needs met, whether that's from friends, family, or a loved one. But work smarter and more efficiently with boundaries rather than harder for a less desirable outcome, which is expectations. In the end, boundaries will allow our relationships to be more effective and manageable. If you need help further understanding ways to explore expectations and establish healthy boundaries in your own life, book a session. We'll walk you through it.